Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into something deeply personal, a place pretty much all of us have been at one point or another. We're going to talk about how to navigate those agonizing seasons when heaven just feels completely, devastatingly silent. It's a journey that takes us from raw confusion and pain straight through to trust, peace, and ultimately, a really unshakable sense of hope. So let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced that crushing feeling of just begging for help, pouring your whole heart out, while your circumstances remain exactly the same? You wait, you believe, but absolutely nothing shifts. It's in those heavy, isolated moments where we inevitably end up asking, God, are you even still there? Why haven't you answered? Well, here is the absolute truth we need to anchor ourselves to today. Even when you can't see him, even when you can't hear a single thing, God is actively working behind the scenes. His silence is never just an empty void. Throughout history, the most faithful people experience these exact same quiet seasons. And as we'll see, their stories prove that God is always moving, even when the process is completely hidden from our view. Just look at Abraham. God gave him this massive promise that he would become the father of many nations. But then, years just passed. He waited and waited until his age made the whole thing seem utterly impossible. His physical body said it couldn't happen, and his circumstances were screaming that it was way too late. But God was actually using that agonizing wait to build an unbreakable trust. And this perfectly captures what true faith actually looks like. Hebrews chapter 11 tells us that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We're human, we demand immediate results. But while Abraham was waiting out there under a sky full of stars, God was meticulously preparing a miracle. That waiting period, it was absolutely not wasted. Or think about Joseph's terrifying timeline. Here's a young guy given a huge prophetic dream by God, but then his life immediately goes in the exact opposite direction. From the brutal betrayal by his own brothers, to being sold into slavery, to getting falsely accused and locked away in a dark prison. It really looked like that painful middle was the bitter end of his story. But here's the crazy part. What looked like a devastating setback was actually the exact preparation he needed for his destiny. Over in Genesis 50, Joseph looks at the very brothers who ruined his life and declares that God took their evil actions and literally meant them for good. The forgotten prisoner became the deliverer. God forged Joseph's ultimate purpose right out of his deepest pain. We see this exact same dynamic with David. He carried the incredible promise of becoming king, yet he spent years running for his life, hiding out in dark, lonely caves. He had the anointing, sure, but definitely not the destination. Sometimes we just have to endure those hidden, isolating seasons in the wilderness. It teaches us complete dependence on God before we're ever ready to step into those visible blessings. Okay, but what happens when the wait turns into raw, devastating suffering? Look at the story of Job. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering literally everything you depended on, your wealth, your health, even your own children, was just gone in an instant. Job's entire world collapsed, leaving him sitting alone in the wreckage, full of profound sorrow and some really desperate questions. Yet right in the middle of this absolute devastation, Job makes this staggering declaration that just halts you in your tracks. He cries out, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." Now, anyone can sing praises when life is perfect, right? But continuing to trust God in the pitch black of your deepest suffering, that reveals a faith that is truly unshakable. Here's what we have to remember when we're in that place. When we are hyper-focused on the pain of our current chapter, God is already looking at the beautifully restored ending of the book. Job could only see catastrophic loss, but God saw a new beginning. Think of a seed buried deep underground. It literally has to break open in the dark, hidden soil before it can ever bloom in the light. God is doing that exact same hidden work in you. And hey, even Jesus' closest friends felt entirely forgotten at times. Remember when they were caught in that fierce storm at sea? The wind is howling, massive waves are violently crashing into their little wooden boat, and the disciples are crying out in sheer panic. And right in the middle of this terrifying chaos, Jesus is calmly sleeping. Maybe today you feel exactly like those terrified disciples. You're facing crashing waves in your own life and wondering if you've been completely abandoned. You're praying, you're crying out, but God seems totally silent while the wind just keeps on howling around you.
But the truth is, His presence doesn't mean you're never going to face storms. What it absolutely guarantees, though, is that you will never have to face those storms alone. Jesus teaches us not to let the terror of tomorrow steal the peace of today. We so often suffer twice, don't we? Once from the actual waves, and a second time from the exhausting fear of what might happen next. But God provides grace for exactly what we need right in this current moment.
So, how do we actually survive the wait? We bring every single fear, worry, and agonizing question straight to Him, no matter how messy it is. And in doing so, we connect our frail human weakness directly to His divine strength. We basically allow God to hold our weary hearts, even while the storm is still raging around us. Because honestly, sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the situation instantly changing. The real miracle is that unexplainable peace you suddenly feel inside, reminding you that God is still in control. You might still be right in the middle of the trial, but you find yourself standing peacefully, fully aware that you're not out there on your own. And that brings us to this absolute anchor of a promise in Hebrews. It reminds us that when people walk away, when the storm is incredibly loud, and when the future feels completely up in the air, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Not just when life is easy, when literally everything else changes, God remains. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this. Your path might seem terrifyingly unclear right now, but the exact same God who calmed the storm, who restored Job, and who brought Joseph all the way to the palace is actively working in your life today. So if heaven seems silent right now, please don't give up. Knowing that He is faithfully writing your story behind the scenes, will you trust God with your current chapter?